Welcome to Advice for Life, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Guidance for Leading a More Purposeful Life, Lesson 2. Today's lesson is titled Family Bliss and is sponsored by Mr. John Orda in loving memory of his mom, Mart de Leon. Thank you very much for your sponsorship. And today we are going to be talking about the Rebbe's advice for family, the stress that the Rebbe would often put on the importance of family, the Rebbe's tips towards marital harmony, to raising healthy children, etc., etc. The family unit, and by the way, I want to take a moment to talk about something. Most of the advice that we're going to talk about today is going to be applicable in all aspects of family. In other words, I know that obviously the relationship between spouse and the relationship between parents and children are different by their very nature. But it doesn't make a difference. Most of the advice we're going to be talking about today is going to be about the general idea of a family unit. So whether it's thinking of your family and you as a child in the framework of your family, as a child and growing up, and perhaps even still today. Hold on one second. It seems like Elise did not get the email. Let me send it to her right now. Welcome, Alan. Good to have you with us. Okay, so I think when we're going to be discussing family, it's probably very, very helpful to think of the analogy of a family tree, right? Anytime we want to display a map of parents and children and grandchildren, we usually use the imagery of a tree. And I think that will be helpful as well in appreciating the importance of the family unit and how much care the family unit needs. You know, imagine a majestic tree, firmly rooted in a lush forest and its branches stretching outwards in all directions. What sustains this tree? I think we can argue that there are multiple different factors that together lead to a tree growing strong, straight, healthy, firm, and being able to be sustained for the beauty that it is. Some people might mention nutrients or water or sunlight or other trees around it. Some trees need trees around it. Some of them need space. All of these different things. And I think we would be correct in assuming that a family, using this analogy of a tree, also needs certain elements in order for it to function, in order for it to flourish. Let's use that word. In order for it to flourish properly. And on page 30, the opening of the exercise is asking you to identify at least your starting point, your point A, before we go through the lesson and we unpack lots of different values and important attitudes and behaviors. Can you put some down on your phone that you think are important attitudes or behaviors or values that should be kept in mind when trying to get a family to flourish? Okay, so that's what we'll start with on page 30. I won't take answers for this exercise, but I think it's worth your while to take out a pen and write some of them down now while I continue to talk, like that you have a starting point for today's lesson. Okay. There's no doubt that any of the things that any of you wrote down or are writing down are vital facets of family life and that are worth discussing. In today's lesson, obviously, we're going to be focusing on the Rebbe's guidance and the main things that the Rebbe spoke about. And I think that by engaging in this study, we all stand to gain. And I'll explain what I mean. I think that one of the struggles that I had when marketing this course was that it comes across as a self-help course. Advice for life. I don't need advice for life. I'm doing just fine, right? I don't need a marriage therapist. Otherwise, I'd be by a marriage therapist. I don't need a therapist to repair my relationship between myself and my son, or myself and my daughter, right? Or myself and my parents. So what does this course have to offer me? And I think that often when we look at advice that the Rebbe would be giving to a family, for example, that's dysfunctional or that's collapsing at the seams, and the Rebbe is attempting to help them get out of the emergency level crisis mode, we tend to distance ourselves from that, and for good reason. Nobody's life is perfect, but I'm doing okay. And I remember somebody once explaining to me that it's interesting that we do that when it comes to mental health and emotional health and relationship health and things like that. We don't do that when it comes to physical health, right? If someone who's obese goes to the doctor And the doctor gives him advice. You have to lose weight. You have to be active. You have to eat the right types of foods in order to lower your cholesterol or raise your blood sugars or whatever it is, wherever he is. Right. For the most part, that advice is good advice for anyone. If someone is slightly overweight or if someone is at a good weight, they should also be eating properly and not indulging too much and being active and exercising a couple times a week, etc. Right? We call it preventative health. But for some reason, when it comes to things like relationships, we're always wary of taking advice if things are going well, as if it can't be improved. So I guess that's the opening disclaimer that I want to make. That even though some of the letters, not all of them, but some of them that we're going to be reading are letters that the Rebbe might have written to someone in crisis, there's a lot for us to gain and to benefit from, despite the fact that our relationships might be going well and our family unit might not be falling apart at the seams. And I think this letter of the Rebbe that we're going to open up with, text 1, Isaac, if I can ask you to read it for us, on page 31, really illustrates this point.
Yes, I received some information about the relationship at home, but I do not know to what extent it reflects the actual situation. Hence, I want to convey to you some thoughts in the light of what the relationship should be according to the Shulchan Aruch, the Jew's practical guide to life. If the relationship is indeed in keeping with it, the purpose of this letter will be to strengthen and deepen it, as there is always room for improvement in all matters of goodness and holiness, Torah and mitzvot. On the other hand, if it is not quite what it should be, I trust that since the Torah is surely a lamp unto your feet, you will bring it up to the desired level, and you will do it with joy and gladness of heart.
Thank you, Isaac. So in other words, the Torah's teachings, which the Rebbe is going to apply to different people's scenarios and different people's lives, can apply to every single one of us. One family can use it to reduce discord or to heal dysfunction, while another family can use it to enhance and deepen their harmony and unity. Okay, beautiful. Enough said about that. I think it's time to dive in. So the first piece of advice that we're going to share is going to be the importance of recognizing and emphasizing in our lives the Torah value of family, the Torah's perspective on family, how the Torah views the family unit, okay? And we're going to start with text 2. And here, let me give you a little bit of background. In the winter of 1974, the Rebbe delivered 2 public addresses, and it was specifically about the family status in contemporary society. As we all know, the 60s and 70s was a shifting time in America. Values were shifting, perspectives were shifting, etc. And the Rebbe was addressing his concern about the lack of cohesiveness that there were in many families. Alan, if I can ask you to start us off, text 2. We're on page 33. Living together, drifting apart.
One of the elements crucial for any nation, especially the Jewish nation, is the preservation of the family unit. Unfortunately, this institution has been utterly neglected. The focus on the family unit is lacking, somewhat or significantly, even among those who genuinely try to follow a Torah lifestyle. They set aside time for Torah study, fulfill mitzvot meticulously, and even act with self-sacrifice to influence Jews who are spiritually disengaged. Yes, the father, mother, and children are walking a single path, the path of Torah and mitzvot. Nevertheless, they do not walk this path as a family. We readily observe the regrettable effects of the father, mother, sons, and daughters living in 4 distinct worlds.
In other words, the Rebbe is standing at the pulpit, standing at the head. For those of you that have been to 770, you're familiar with how the Rebbe would stand up on a stage. If you haven't been to 770, I'll take one moment during each lesson to plug our upcoming trip. In May, we're doing a trip to Crown Heights. Rabbi Hanoka and myself will be leading a group to Crown Heights, and you'll be able to visit 770, the Rebbe's shul, the Ohel, the Rebbe's resting place, etc. If you've never been, I highly encourage you to join us. It's a very reasonably affordable trip. And I speak to the people that are here live on Zoom and to the people that are watching the video. You're all welcome to join us. It's very reasonably affordable, both financially as well as time-wise. If you're working, you should need to take off probably just Friday. You could take a red eye on Thursday, be gone Friday, Shabbos, we're in Crown Heights, Sunday we're in Crown Heights, and Sunday afternoon we leave back. In any event, so the Rebbe is standing at 770. Imagine a room filled with Orthodox Jews, right? If you've ever been to any Orthodox Jewish home, you're familiar with the fact that they place a tremendous emphasis on family. And in the address, the Rebbe is clearly talking to those Orthodox families. He's saying that the Torah observance is well, and the studying and the praying, and it's all going well, right? And yet, the Rebbe feels the need to talk about the fact that the family unit is falling apart. And the reason the Rebbe is saying so is because there are major issues that can crop up in a person's life when they don't have a strong family unit to fall back on. And I want to take a moment to talk about them. Why don't we, if everybody can unmute themselves, why don't we try to use our collective information here? On page 34, we're asking a question. What adverse outcomes might arise from a lack of family unity? Isaac, can you think of anything?
Well, definitely not lack of sorry. If you don't communicate and are verbal with your family, you could all be on the wrong page, especially with spouses in that matter.
Correct. You are
Yes.
correct. You'll be on the wrong page, but I guess my question is, why would that be detrimental? Why would that be a bad thing? I know I'm asking a very obvious question. In other words, I'm asking, like, why is family good for you? We all walk around just assuming the family is good for you, right? But we're trying to really appreciate it. Alan, anything come to mind? What adverse effects would there be in our lives if we didn't have a strong family unit?
You lack the support that you need.
Okay. So you might come across some sort of stressful situation and not have enough support. I like that. Elise, anything come to mind?
A person that doesn't trust, a person that's unstable, doesn't form good relationships because they don't have a good role model.
Very good. So in other words, the family unit is a model, a safe model, let's call it, within which you can practice your relationships, and everybody loves you anyways, right? Unconditional love.
Yeah.
You're trying things out to see how you can develop trust and how you can learn how to have a relationship. I like that.
Or you'll be
Very nice.
searching for a dysfunctional one because you want what you have. That feels natural.
Same idea, right? Then you're perpetuating
armchair psychologist here. Okay.
Right.
I mean, definitely isolation is not healthy in general.
Very good.
Especially,
Thank you, Isaac. I was just bringing that up on the screen. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah,
no,
I was just saying, especially if you're not, the people you should be closest to with his family. If you isolate yourself from them, it's just a lot harder to just just live casual social life.
It's going to be hard to find people that are not from your family that you'll be able to be as close with.
Precisely.
In order to avoid loneliness, which is well documented as a negative thing, right? Correct. I think, who mentioned communication? Someone mentioned good communication. Conflict is another strong detriment to not having a close family unit. Resentment is a big one.
Yes.
When you're not allies with your family, very often there's a lot of resentment to family. Think about people who haven't come to terms with their parents and they feel a lot of resentment towards their parents, right? It's an unhealthy feeling. Not just, sure, they can be upset at their parents. If you ask them, they'll tell you it's all about their parents. But usually they're carrying around so much resentment within them, which leads to negativity in their own lives. And I think I was going to say most important, but I don't want to discount any of these that are on the screen. I think another important one is the transmitting of values. In other words, one of the most important things that parents should be doing to children and children should be doing to their siblings, and et cetera, that we should be doing in a family unit, transmitting values, whatever those values are that are important to us, right? In a non-Jewish family, there might be some values. In a Jewish family, obviously, it's Jewish values. What it means to be a good and upstanding person and lead a meaningful life, etc. Try teaching that to a child who's at odds with you, who isn't in agreement with you, right? So it's going to be very difficult to transmit values when there isn't a cohesive family unit. Let's keep this conversation going. So question number 2, we're on the same page here, on page 34. What elements do you think there are that contribute to a family's difficulty in maintaining family cohesion? Anybody? What are the things that lead to that? Isaac, did you say something?
No, I was
Thank you.
just not yet. I
Okay.
was just kind of thinking of this over without repeating myself again.
That's okay.
It's very similar, but yet a little different from.
It's a very different question, because before we're
Yes.
asking why is it important to have family, now we're asking what leads us to not get along with family. Let me put it this way. A little bit of a risky move, but let me do this. I want you all to picture, and I'm not making any assumptions here, but I want you all to picture a family member that you don't get along with. Okay? What do you think is one of the main factors that's standing in the way of you getting along with your family? It could be a spouse, it could be an ex-spouse, it can be children, it could be parents, it could be cousins, anybody. What do you think are the factors that usually get in the way? So maybe this is a little more of a delicate question, so I'll leave it as it is. And I want to introduce three things that I think are big ones, but I want to make one disclaimer first. It is our tendency to think that if something is standing in the way of something else, let's just use our current example, right? If I introduce a factor, this is the factor, and that's standing in the way of family unity, our tendency is to turn this into public enemy number one. How can I get rid of this? But actually, all three things that we are going to be discussing today are not things we're looking to get rid of. We're looking to temper them. We're looking to figure out how to balance them. Let me start with the first one. I think you'll see exactly where I'm going. Number one is individualism. And I think this is something that in the past 50 years has really had a rising tick, right? Contemporary society places a very strong emphasis on personal fulfillment. First thing we ask somebody when we meet them at any social gathering is, after their name, what do you do? Right? What do you
do for a living?
And look, even at that, not only do we ask them what do you do, everybody understands that when you're asking them what do you do, you don't mean how much Torah do you study or what classes do you go to or what are your hobbies. You mean what do they do for a living? What is their career choice?
Mhm.
And that's on a very high pedestal, particularly in the United States, but probably in general in contemporary society. And we don't think about it very often, but that stands in direct opposition to a cohesive family unit. Not necessarily career specifically. Individualism, the overemphasis on who are you and what type of self-made man are you and how much have you lifted yourself up by your bootstraps and how much are you fulfilling yourself and how much worth are you to the world? Now, let me again make that disclaimer that I made at the beginning. We're not saying we're criticizing individualism. Individualism is a very important thing to talk about. And by the way, the end of today's lesson, after we finish emphasizing the family unit, we're going to come back to individualism and say the individual cannot get lost in the family unit, right? But there's no question that individualism as an attitude, who am I? And by the way, another word for it could be selfishness or ego, right? But even on a healthy level, it stands in direct opposition to a family unit, and we have to figure out how to make sure the two of them are operating in tandem. Okay, same thing for the next one. The next one that I want to talk about is technology, because these are the areas that we're going to bring advice from the Rebbe about. Technology, right? Now, today we tend to think about technology as social media, immediately, smartphones, etc., right? But this really started in the 60s and the 50s with television. It used to be that a family would sit around and talk with each other, even if they were reading books. It wasn't as, and books were, by the way, when books came out, I'm sure that was also a challenge, but families spend time together. These days, and especially exaggerated in today's day and age with social media and smartphones, etc., what happens is technology allows us to be present physically, but not present. So we're here, I'm here in the same house as this family, but my mind is actually somewhere else. My emotions are actually somewhere else. I'm communicating with somebody else entirely. I also want to say, by the way, that specifically with social media technology, and that's a recent past 20, 30 years problem, we struggle with something else, which is that we are often replacing, or we think we're replacing, some of the contributions that family makes to our life. So think about things like connection or relationships, etc. We think we're doing that on our phone, and there's this mirage in our head that I'm here and I'm in a relationship with someone on social media, when obviously, as has been well documented, it's not a real relationship. It's not providing all of the benefits that are being that would be provided by a family. And that's another issue that that technology presents. And again, I'll make that disclaimer again. I'm going to make it all 3 times by all 3 of them. We're not suggesting that technology is a terrible thing. As many of you know from previous courses where we've discussed this, Chabad embraces technology and talks about how we have to figure out how to use technology in our lives. Elsewhere in the Orthodox world, that's not the case. Some people say nobody should ever have smartphones, period. That's it. They're just a terrible, toxic influence. I'm not saying there isn't validity to that approach, but today we're going to be discussing how can we still maintain technology in our lives, but yet make sure that it's not ruining our family values. And the last one is here they're just saying other factors. I want to talk about one more specifically, and that is that throughout history, women generally remained at home and didn't pursue careers. Now, we can all point to benefits from the fact that this is no longer the reality. For example, I recognize I'm acutely aware that I'm the youngest here on this Zoom. I will speak from my generation. It is impossible. It's not just necessary that the woman work. It's impossible for a family that's going to have children and attempt to buy a house and attempt to actually live day to day and not live in poverty. It's impossible to survive without both spouses working, unless one of them struck it rich in some crazy fluke case. So we can all talk about the benefits of the importance that women are in the workforce. And I want to make sure that I'm not talking about this as if it's a negative thing. It's not a bad thing that women are in the workforce. It's a good thing, generally speaking. But that is one of the challenges that we have today with keeping the family unit together, because women, obviously, being naturally nurturing and being in charge of the home, the need for them to juggle that while also being in the workforce obviously presents a challenge to the family unit, and it's very, very difficult. So in short, fewer forces in today's day and age encourage us to unify as a family, and more forces, it seems, are pulling us apart. Perhaps not egregiously so, but that's the reality on the ground. And so the first thing that I'd like to talk about today is the Torah view of family and what the Torah's ideal of a family unit actually looks like. So the Rebbe presented the challenge, and the Rebbe actually had some very strong advice for it. But before we dive into it, let's turn our attention to the video screens for a quick collage about the Rebbe sharing with different people the importance of family.
Rabbi Yitzhak Meir Gurari is Mashpia of the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Montreal. His father, Rabbi Zalman Gurari, was a devoted chassid and a financial supporter of the Rebbe's work.
At a certain time, there was around Tafshi Yutes. My father did business in overseas with big rich people. Rashag, who was in charge of the yeshiva, asked my father that when he goes over there, he should take him along, introduce him to those people. He should be able to raise money for the yeshiva. My father says, okay, I'll do it on one condition. If you get the Rebbe to promise me that if we're successful, he'll give me a broche for whatever I ask for him. So he went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, okay, made a deal. They came, so the Itake went with him, and they were very successful. When they came back, so my father told Rashag, so he went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, okay, tell him to come in. So he came in, so he asked the Rebbe, what do you want? So the Rebbe asked him, what do you want? I told you, what do you want? My father then had a problem, a big business problem. I'm proud, I don't know myself what. He needed a nest. And he wanted the Rebbe to give him a broche that he should have this nest. So the Rebbe said, you have a chance to ausbetten alles, was du willst. Die erste Sache bet man, soll haben Nachas für Kinder. Die Kinder sollen sein, fromme Kinder sollen auswachsen, so wie der Rebbe ihm will. So my father says, better das. I says, okay, they gave him a broche. I don't know if he gave him a broche for the business deal, that I don't know, but my father repeated this very often.
The Rebbetzin loved the Rebbe with all her heart. I mean, the Rebbe loved the Rebbe Rebbetzin always showed great concern for her, and he was always telling me, please go after this visit immediately to the Rebbetzin to reassure her that things are okay, because she's always so worried. And vice versa, the Rebbetzin just had such a great admiration and respect for her, man. The Rebbe cherished his private tea party with the Rebbetzin. The Rebbe said that he equates the importance of the tea party with his wife on a daily basis with the necessity to put on tefillin.
И фора Мария aussi.
La prochaine avenue, don't postpone it. God Almighty bless you.
Ça, c'est mon directeur en Suisse,
Yeah.
à la Banque multicommerciale à Genève.
ברוך בהצלחה. ברוך השם. אני בקור מאמה ש...
Thank you very much. We are always good partners. I am very glad.
Yeah. You can sell him, it is a good for the fame of the bank, it is good when they see the director, yes, a happy family life.
C'est le directeur for a happy family
God
life.
Almighty
Okay.
bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, to be sure, this attitude of the Rebbe's to the importance of family was not, his own innovation. It stemmed obviously directly from the Torah, as we'll see in text 3. Mark, you want to read for us? You have your textbook with you?
Yes. Where do you want me to start?
We're on page 34, if you can. I don't know if you're available to.
Okay. Yeah. When God counted the Jewish people, in addition to the census of the entire nation, equaling 303,550, the Torah emphasizes and repeats that its members were counted according to their families, to the houses of their fathers. Numbers 1-2, meaning that they were
Up on
counted
the
as
screen if you want to see the verse.
meaning they were counted as family units.
So let me just give you some background. This is the beginning of Bamidbar, the beginning of the 4th book of the 5 books of Moses, and God instructs the Jewish people that there's going to be a census. We're going to count the Jews. Now, obviously, God doesn't need the Jews to be counted with this system, either with the half shekel or the different ways that they were counted. God didn't need for them to be counted physically in order for him to know how many there were, right? So Rashi immediately explains that the reason that Hashem is counting the Jewish people is to express his love for them. An example I heard when I was a young child is that what are the things we always count? Anybody? What do we always count? Money. We always count diamonds. We always count our net worth, right? Why? Because it's something that's valuable to us. We love money. We like it. So we count it. So to Hashem, he's counted the Jewish people because he loves the Jewish people. But take a look at this detail. Hashem says, when you count the Jewish people, I want you to count them as families. In other words, God doesn't only want to express his love for the Jewish nation, he wants to express his love for Jewish families. And that's because the family unit isn't just important for certain technical and practical reasons, it's actually divine. Marilyn, if you can read for us, please, text 4, the divine name.
The Torah's mystical teachings strongly emphasize the importance of the family unit. The minimum requirement to fulfill the mitzvah is to be fruitful and multiply, is to give birth to a son and a daughter. Kabbalah and Hasidot explain that this is hinted at in the name of God, spelled with the letters Yud and Hey, followed by Vav and Hey. The Yud corresponds to the father, the first Hey to the mother. The Vav alludes to the male child, and the final Hey to the daughter. A family with all 4 elements, father, mother, daughter, and son, is a complete representation of the divine name. It follows then that just as the 4 letters of the divine nature, when inscribed together as a word, become a unique entity, God's personal name, so the individuals of a family are fundamentally transformed into a new existence when they become a family unit.
Thank you, Marilyn. The family is linked to the most holy entity, the divine name. Excuse me. Just as 4 letters 4 letters that seemingly random, totally unconnected to each other, together become the name of God. So too do 4 individuals, separate individuals, each with their own identity, forming a family together. They literally become an entity representing God in this world. Indeed, the Torah teaches that the ultimate divine dwelling, remember last week we spoke about, for those of you that were in shul, for sure you remember, right, about how we built the Mishkan and the dwelling place for Hashem in this world, the sanctuary, the traveling tabernacle, and eventually the holy temples in Jerusalem. The ultimate of this is actually within the family setting. The Rebbe continues. Marilyn, can you keep going? Text 5.
In communicating his directive to build a holy temple, God stated, "Build for me a temple and I will dwell within them." Our sages noted the anomaly that the verse says within them, the Jewish people, instead of within it, the temple. It informs us that God wishes to dwell not only in his temple, but also within each of us. In truth, God's dwelling within us is not a secondary objective, but the primary objective for his directive. For if God's primary home were the temple, the Torah should have stated clearly that God would reside within it, while at the same time finding a way to hint at the concept that God also dwells within us. Instead, the reverse is the case. The Torah states openly, "I will dwell within them," indicating that this is the primary objective. The opening of the verse, "Build for me a temple," is simply the method by which the primary goal of dwelling within the Jewish people can be achieved. Where is the physical location of God's dwelling among us? In a home where father, mother, sister, and brother form a cohesive family unit.
Thank you again. So in other words, this, you know that feeling of awe the first time you stood at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, or when you hear for the first time about the Holy Temple and everything that happened in the Holy Temple and the fact that God's presence came and rested in the Holy Temple, etc. What we're discovering is that magnificent temple with all its grandeur was not an end in itself. It was supposed to be, visiting the temple was designed to ignite within a person the desire to create a temple out of their own lives, right? The temple was a means to an end. It wasn't the end all, get God to come down and be in the temple. No, the goal is for God to be present in our lives, for our lives to be homes for God, if you will. So what we are learning is that God chose a unique strategy for this grand endeavor, how to get godliness to come down into this world, and that is the family unit. He wanted that there should be small, tightly knit battalions on earth that are known as families, and within the bounds of this family unit, the values of Torah and mitzvah should be transferred or transmitted one generation to the next, and that they together should fight against the forces of darkness and make this world a good place, make this world a place where Hashem is comfortable and where Hashem's presence can rest. His wish to dwell within us is actually to dwell within the life of a family. Let's watch another video of the Rebbe's attitude on this. Yes, go ahead, Mark.
In some translations, it'll say among them, but you're being specific, and Rebbe's being specific. It's within them, and that seems more realistic. You know, that God is within us. Well, can you explain why they would use among? Why some translations were that way? And
right. So the answer is that the actual words are grammatically incorrect. And that's what everybody's talking about. So the literal translation would be, V'asud mikdash, and they shall make for me a sanctuary, V'shachanti, and I will rest, or I will dwell, bitocham, in them. That's the literal translation, in them. Not among them, not within them, not anything, in them. Now that's not grammatically, doesn't make grammatical sense, because if you're talking about the temple, it should say in it, not in them. So when people say among them, they mean among the Jewish people. They're attempting to make this based on commentary. They're attempting to make the words make more sense in the context of the verse. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Explaining it. Yes.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Please turn your attention to the video screens.
In 1970, Rabbi Nosson Gurari and his wife set out on shlichus, establishing the Chabad Student Center at State University of New York, Buffalo.
On the first year after I was already in Buffalo, I went in with my late wife to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave tremendous brachas. Among the things that he said was that there should be a dira b'tachtonim in the city of Buffalo and all the communities around. But the Rebbe ended with these holy words that the nekuda hapnimius from Alts, which means all the things that he blessed till now, the nekuda hapnimius von Alts is chsidische nachas von the Kinder, which means that the Rebbe made it very clear that the most important thing, he said already, dir b'tachtonim, you would think what could come after that. He specifically said, but the nekuda hapnimius von Alts is chassidische nachas von the Kinder.
Okay, so we mentioned that there's a lot of in our contemporary society, there are a lot of factors or a lot of forces that are pulling the family unit apart. I think that one of the major attitudes that we need to learn to develop, if we're trying to not let those forces rip the family apart, but still somehow maintain those forces. We want women in the workforce. We want technology in our lives. We want a sense of individualism. We just don't want that to tear a family unit apart, which is what naturally happens if we allow those things to go to their extreme. So I think overall, the main thing that's needed is a shift in attitude. What do I mean? The main reason why people feel that technology, for example, any of these forces they stand in direct conflict to the family unit is because there's a specific type of attitude that's being adopted, and that attitude is a "what have you done for me lately" attitude, right? I think we're all familiar with this term. The idea is that you're growing up, you're 1 year old, you're 2 years old, you need family, you need parents, you need siblings. Why? They take care of you, they help you eat, they help you sleep. All right. As you start to grow older, let's take as an example the teenage years, right? Which is when a lot of teenagers start to rebel against their parents. And it's because of this. The attitude that starts to arise is, what have you done for me lately? Yeah, I see why I needed a family up until I was 5 years old, but I was 10 years old. But recently I've begun to feel like I don't need my family so much. And that's the attitude through which everything is judged. By the way, it's understandable that we use that attitude. That's the attitude we use, for example, in business all the time, right? I'm paying for a subscription service, whatever it is, Apple TV, whatever it is, right? Apple, some sort of business product that a particular technology company has. Every once in a while, you filter it through the pros and cons. How much am I using it? How much am I not using it? How much am I paying for it? Is it worth it? Is this particular benefit worth my input in life, right? And when it comes to the teenage years, that's one of the times when children start to say to themselves, hold on a second, at least in their perception, what have you done for me lately, right? They feel they can find an abundant sense of belonging and emotional support from their friends, right? That becomes a big, prominent part of your life when you're a teenager. Your friends are a big deal, right? If they have questions, if they're looking for wisdom, they can just type it into Google. Maybe they already have some sort of summer job, they're already getting some sort of income, and they're paying for their own food and their own this and their own gadgets and whatever. They're like, hold on a second. What have you done for me lately? What has the family unit done for me? And they start to weigh that against the concerns of like, yeah, I can tell you what the family unit is taking away from me. This one's annoying, and that one I'm not in the mood of, and what do I need it for? So it starts to fall by the wayside. So as different forces start to pull at them, they say, you know what? I'm not resisting. Let it go. But this is only if your attitude is, what can I gain from family? But if we appreciate that family in and of itself is a value, as the Torah puts it, that having a family, having a cohesive family actually brings the divine presence down into this world. So then the question doesn't become, what am I getting out of it? The question is, what can I do in order to make the family? What have I done for the family lately? Not what has the family done for me? What can I do? So then the effort that you're willing to put in actually is bringing about much greater results than you think. And this is precisely why the Rebbe advocated this perspective when addressing the issue of family cohesion. That for families at risk of living together but drifting apart, living in the same house but going different directions, the Torah model of a family becomes very, very, very empowering. Let's take a look at text 6. I don't remember where we're holding it with the reading. I guess Alan, text 6 on page 38, please. The overriding consideration.
I trust it is unnecessary to emphasize to you at length that the Jewish way of life, together with its customs, is not only very significant in general, but also in every detail and in the very order of things. In light of this, it becomes obvious how important are peace and harmony between a husband and wife, since the mitzvah of making peace between a husband and a wife is counted among the mitzvahs whose fruits a Jew enjoys in this world, while the capital remains for the world to come. These are mentioned right at the beginning of the Siddur, together with the morning blessings, which are said even before starting the actual morning prayers. With this approach in mind, it will prove somewhat easier to understand that even if one party were to be completely in the right, or almost completely in the right, while the other party was completely in the wrong, or almost completely in the wrong, it would still be incumbent upon both parties to do everything in their power to restore peace and harmony. As to the situation itself, namely who was right and who was wrong, I cannot, of course, go into this, nor is it necessary in light of what has been said above. For the important thing, as already stated, is to strengthen the family ties, this being the overriding consideration. However, it would be well if you could find a mutual friend before whom both of you could unburden yourselves in a frank exchange of grievance. It is possible that an outsider, who at the same time is a friend, might see more objectively and find the best way to straighten things out, and in the soonest possible time, so that once again, peace and harmony may reign in the home.
Thank you, Alan. So obviously this is a letter to a couple that's struggling, right? This is a couple in crisis mode. They're writing to the Rebbe, asking for the Rebbe's help, for the Rebbe's advice. And in this letter, as in the next one, which we're going to read in just a moment, text 7, a similar letter, well, not similar in the content, but similar scenario, where the Rebbe is writing to a family like this. Sure, there are practical bits of advice. Don't get into the weeds of the argument, have mediation by a good friend, try to jumpstart the goodwill, etc. But I want to take a look, and what we're really looking for is the theme. What is the Rebbe searching to convey to this couple that would help with the overall attitude to the harmony in the family? And that, my friends, is specifically about appreciating the value of a family unit in and of itself as a value to strive for. Why? I'll tell you why. Because one of the major factors, and it doesn't make a difference what type of relationship it is, one of the major factors that leads to conflict is when someone says, this isn't worth it for me. You're in the wrong against me. I can't do this because that would be a terrible thing for me, with a strong sense of individualism. Now, normally we would call this ego. We would say this guy's got to work on his ego, etc. But here's the flip side. Sure, there's a strong sense of individualism. There's ego, all of that. But there's also something that's missing. What's missing is that this person doesn't view. Let's take a typical example, right? One person is some sort of argument, and one person is right and one person is wrong. the person who's wrong, if they're in this marriage, for what can I get out of this? I'm sorry, the person who's right, if they're in this marriage, for what can I get out of it? So then me being right means that why should I concede to you and do something that you want, but I'm really in the right here? Yes? But if you look at building a family as an ideal in and of itself, what you're trying to do is build a family, being right doesn't become so important anymore. Even if you're not right, I'm sorry, even if you are right, you can still look past that and move forward. Think, for example, of like in the business world, right? When there's some sort of project is trying to near its conclusion, whatever it is, pick your example. Being right and being wrong pales in comparison to, are we progressing towards the goal of what we're trying to achieve? And that's the attitude that the Rebbe is trying to really implement to this couple. Adopt the Torah attitude of the family being a unit that's important to preserve in and of itself. Let's take a look at another one, and then I'll stress this idea again. Isaac, if you can read to me, please. Text 7. Every effort is worthwhile.
Our Torah teaches us that as water reflects a face, so does one heart respond to another. I see from your letter that you are willing to do everything that depends on you, that there should be shalom bayis, peace and harmony in your home. And as a practical businessman, you are surely implementing this in actual practice. I am therefore confident that the above quotation from the Torah will be fulfilled also in the present case. I want to take advantage of this opportunity, since you have written to me, to emphasize again the enormous importance of Shalom Bayis. So much so that our Torah, called Torah's Emes, because it presents the truth, declares that when a husband and a wife are worthy, the Sheminah,
the Shekhinah, which is the godly presence, the divine presence.
Yes, the divine presence abides among them. Obviously, every effort is worthwhile to ensure God's presence in the home, with all that it means in terms of his blessings, materially and spiritually. Hence, even when one thinks that one is 100% right, and it pays to consolidate for the sake of peace, and especially for the sake of abiding shanicha as above. There is also the assurance of our sages in such matters. Try hard and you will succeed.
So again, we have some very, technical pieces of advice. Try this, try that, etc. But here's the Rebbe's main point. The Rebbe is observing a society in which the Torah model for family is falling by the wayside. Usually people are adopting the attitude of, what have you done for me lately? Is this relationship serving me? Is this family serving me? Is this unit serving me? Is this scenario serving me? Says the Rebbe, we would do well to think to ourselves the exact opposite. The family unit is something that is worth preserving in and of itself, because it is divine, because that is how we bring divinity down here into the world. And then the whole attitude changes. All of a sudden, you're willing to invest. All of a sudden, you're willing to compromise. Like I said, like I give the example with some sort of financial project that you're trying to achieve, being right pales in comparison to getting the job done, right? You're trying to build a house, right? And the plumber tells you, so you'll be wrong, but move on, right? You want to get the job done. And that's when you start to take steps towards reconciliation, making things work, etc. But I think that this in and of itself is probably insufficient, because everything we've discussed till now is a great theory. It's a great paradigm for how to think about this. But I think that's what the purpose of this next letter of the Rebbe is. I think that if we're really trying to take this attitude and make an actual shift in our lives, we got to figure out, how do we take concrete steps? What is advice that I can have in my life that can actually help me take concrete steps to enhancing the family unit? And thus, the Rebbe proceeded to offer a practical suggestion that, when implemented, will have bottom line results of boosting family cohesiveness. Now, I'm going to warn you that this is most likely hold on a second. No. My warning is for later, not for this. Some very practical advice about how to strengthen the family unit. Elise, very Jewish advice, if you will. Elise, can you read for us Text 8. Don't forget.
Remember, I don't have the book yet.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. So, Mark. Text 8. Don't forget, Mark, to unmute yourself. There you go. Go ahead.
One solution for this challenge is to emphasize something that is already important for other reasons. Efforts should be made to ensure that all family members come together, beginning with Friday evening and especially on Friday night when the Shabbat meal is served. Parents and children should gather in the same room, around the same table, engaging in conversations fitting for Shabbat. On Shabbat, it's easier for the family to unite because family members aren't engaged in their weekday endeavors. When the family nurtures this unity on Shabbat, it will experience unity throughout the week. The factor that unites them, cultivated during the Shabbat meal, will prevail over their differing focused areas, so that their differences only complement each other. Achieving such unity within the family is not likely to occur spontaneously because the importance of the family unit has been overlooked for several years. We must acknowledge that this area demands dedicated attention and effort. Fortunately, the Talmud, Megillah 6b, assures us that diligent work will yield positive results.
Celebrating Shabbos holds importance as a mitzvah, right? It holds importance because it reminds us of creation, it reminds us of the Exodus, etc. However, beyond the spiritual significance that Shabbos provides for us, it also has some very powerful impacts. So it can have a very powerful impact on nurturing family harmony. Let's go through some of the benefits. Number one, I would say, and probably the most common one that people will mention, is quality time, right? Spending time together, sharing meals, engaging in heartfelt conversation creates a unique bond among loved ones. I know we tend to think, oh, families should just love each other, but remember, everything should just exist. But the more effort you invest in it, the more it's actually going to be that way. I think that there's also something powerful to spending time together outside of a practical setting. In other words, when we get together for a Shabbos meal, the discussion is not about, okay, who's going to take out the trash and who's going to do this and how are we going to do that? Who's going to pick up the kids and what time are you getting and what time is she getting and how was your tennis lesson and whatever. There's a lot more time, quality time, let's call it, everyone sitting together so that the conversation eventually turns to a more unifying discussions. All of those things that I just mentioned, while they're discussions, who's going to pick up, when is tennis, they're all discussions about the individuals in the family. I have tennis, you have a class you want to go to, you have a social function that we have to figure out who's going to drive you to, etc. That's all helping the individuals be individuals, which is important and which we're going to focus on soon. But for now, we want to find a time when the discussion is actually going to be much more unifying, where the discussion will be about values that we agree with together, etc. Today, we can obviously add another element to this conversation, that quality time and unifying discussion becomes exaggerated, becomes the most productive when there's no technological distractions. Right? You're keeping Shabbos. Your phones are not there. Your TV is off. None of these things are there. Right? By the way, if you go back in time, right, even the distraction of making the food, which if you've ever been a host or a hostess, you know that if you're the one who's very often you don't enjoy as much because you're busy with the food, right? One of the elements of Shabbos is that you're not allowed to prepare the food once Shabbos comes in. Everything has to be done. Everything has to be ready. You spent Friday might be a very stressful day, but the moment that we light the candles, everything stops. No distractions, not technological or otherwise. And I think this is probably the most powerful idea that can ever be suggested for how to have a dedicated time to strengthen the family unit. Think about back to the business example. Any business, any company that's being successful has a time when they are focused, whatever it is, once a quarter, once a year, whatever it is, when it's kind of like an overview of the company. Let's sit down, let's discuss how the company's doing, let's focus on it, etc. Family is the only thing that we just expect it, if we're ignoring the Torah's advice, to just float along and be healthy no matter what, without us investing any effort in it. A Shabbos meal, a healthy Shabbos meal, is actually time to invest in it. And I think this concludes the first piece of advice that we're making today, which is focusing on the Torah ideal of family, specifically through the lens of the Shabbos meal. If you'd like to do exercise 2.3, which is on page 43, you're welcome to do so. Taking practical steps to introducing either a Shabbos routine or somehow imbuing your life with the Torah ideal of family. Okay. There is one other theme underlying much of the Rebbe's advice about family that's probably worthy of our attention. Couples that were seeking to enhance their relationship, often what they do is they thoroughly evaluate their lives to ensure that all of the components of a healthy partnership are in place, right? Things like gratitude, listening, right? Are you grateful for the other partner? Are you listening to the other partner? Do you respect the other people in the relationship, right? Are you spending quality time together? Is everybody compromising, right? These are like the typical tips or the typical conversations that there would be in a therapist's office if we're trying to repair a relationship, right? But the Rebbe would frequently guide individuals in a similar kind of vein, to check and triple check, to make sure that nothing important is missing in the relationship, but always with one specific thing in mind. A very specific aspect, which to the Rebbe was the foundation of a healthy relationship, and it is text 9. Marilyn, if you can read for us, please.
I have learned with pleasure of your forthcoming marriage. I send you and your bride my blessings of Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. It is superfluous to underscore that from the moment of marriage, a new era begins in the life of two persons who have united into one to build together an eternal home among our people, Israel, into posterity. In the case of building a physical home, the important thing, even to those who otherwise attach much value to external appearances and superficialities, is the solid foundation upon which the entire edifice is to rest. So, and more so, in the case of the spiritual home, the important and vital conditions are not to be found in superfluous aspects, but in the reliability and character for the material to withstand all sorts of tests and all kinds of weather. What I mean by the solid foundations of the Jewish home needs no elaboration to you. Throughout the ages, the Torah and mitzvot have been given the solid foundations of our people and have given us courage and strength to endure the most terrible, inhumane persecutions and tests to the limits of self-sacrifice and martyrdom. This power of self-sacrifice for Torah and mitzvot has made us indestructible. It is my heartfelt wish to you, and I'm confident of it, that you and your chosen one will together build your home from the start upon the foundations of Torah and mitzvos, with an unshakable determination to make your home Jewish in every way, in thought and in deed, thus assuring yourself real happiness, Jewish happiness.
So this is where the cynicism starts to come in, right? I think many of us can imagine the recipient of this letter. Fellow's about to get married, writes to the Rebbe, telling the Rebbe that he's going to get married. The Rebbe sends him a letter of blessing. So far, everything is very typical, right? Then he takes a look. He's like, as I embark on this journey of marriage, my primary focus should be about Torah and mitzvos. My primary focus should be about nurturing the relationship. Okay, the Rebbe is a rabbi, so when he's religious with leaders, whenever he gets a chance, he throws in Torah and mitzvos, do more Torah, do more mitzvos, etc. But in reality, the Rebbe sincerely believed that Judaism was the best foundation of a Jewish home. I often tell this to people who are coming to me, to talk to me about the fact that they're in a relationship or potentially in a relationship with someone who's not Jewish. It's not just that, oh, you might have different values, you won't get along. It's not just that there's a mitzvah in the Torah that a Jew and a non-Jew shouldn't get married. What's going on here is that to a Jew, a family is built on a foundation of Torah and mitzvot. What does that mean? Jewish observance isn't just good for Judaism, it's good for familial relationships. Why is that? In lesson 1, we noted how the Rebbe taught that there's no, the way the Rebbe looked at things, there was no real divide between the physical and the spiritual. As a part of that understanding, so last week we learned about how financial well-being depends on one's spiritual well-being, right? But here, the Rebbe is taking the same idea and applying it to marriage. It's not just relevant regarding family life. This aspect of life, just like all others, requires divine blessing for success. And when there's peace between body and soul, when there's harmony within a person's life, between the spiritual and the physical, so then there can actually be peace between spouses. Why? Because now they're a cohesive unit. That's the spiritual reason, right? In other words, the spiritual and the physical are not divorced one from the other. In order to have blessing in your marriage, you want to have the right spiritual attitude towards it. But there's another, and possibly, I guess we can think of a psychological explanation for why Torah and mitzvos are also the best foundation for a home. Let's talk about this for a second. Human relationships, hold on a second, Mark. I see you raising your hand, but hold on one second. Human relationships require connection points. Yes? Yes. Think of any connection point, and think of any relationship that you have, you'll think of the connection point. I mean of small relationships, right? Think of a colleague at work. The connection point is your job. The two of you together, you work at one job, you're doing it together, that's your connection point, right? Okay, let's go into people who have a more nuanced relationship, like spouses, for example. There's multiple connection points. There might be emotional support, right? There might be helping each other physically, or financially helping out with the finances, two different people having a job. These become the connection points. Every connection point means that there's a need, right? I have a need, for example, for emotional support. My wife fills that. My wife has a need for emotional support. I fill that, hopefully, right? Financial. I can't support a family of my own. My wife can't support a family of my own. So together, we're supporting a family financially, right? Physically. I don't have enough time to do everything that needs to be done in order to, all the different connection points that there are, right? The problem is that if a relationship is built only on connection points, only on needs, then every once in a while, there's going to be a moment where the question becomes, what happens if our needs clash, right? What if the connection point is a common ground connection? We both love skiing, right? What happens if one of them stops to like skiing? If the whole relationship is built only because they both like the outdoors, only because they both like to whatever, or they're both Republican or Democrat, then what happens if one of them starts to change? All of a sudden, we don't share the same interests anymore. We're not the same in that way. I don't have a need for you anymore because now I can do it on my own, whatever it is, right? Or I found someone else to fill this particular need, or you're not filling that need for me the way you used to, right? What have you done for me lately? That's psychologically, that is one of the simplest ways for a relationship to start falling apart. It is imperative, therefore, what's the solution to this? The solution is to find a point of connection that doesn't consist of something temporal. It has to be something that's more unifying, something that's more encompassing. And that, my friends, is Torah and mitzvot. That is a relationship with the divine. Together, we stand for something higher, right? When two people in a relationship, obviously at its most basic level, are both Jewish, but as it starts to go on more, the important things to them are Torah and mitzvahs, connecting to something higher, connecting to God, connecting to the divine, etc. So now what happens? Their focus shifts, right? To not, I need something for you, you need something for me. Those are technical aspects of the relationship. That's not really what our relationship consists of. You know what our relationship really consists of? How are we together creating a home for God? How are we together going to serve God? We are going to be partners to serve Hashem. That becomes the focus. And that starts to filter down. It starts to ooze out into every aspect of life, into careers, into hobbies, into schooling, etc. So now I come home and I need some emotional support because some colleague at work is being stressful and I want to talk to my wife about it. Right? My wife comes home and she's got a friend who she's had a little squabble with and she needs some emotional support for that. Right? I come home and I need some technical support. I'm very tired and I need someone to physically help me with things that need to get done before the day is over, right? All of those things become technical aspects in how are we together serving Hashem, right? And that becomes clear in the marriage. My wife asks me, you had a stressful day today at work. Is that something that's required in order to serve Hashem? Are we together doing what we want to do in order to live a higher life? All of a sudden, you introduce something to the marriage that can never disappear. Why? Because as we know, God is the only thing in this world that doesn't shift, that doesn't change, that doesn't erode over time, right? So if you start to introduce that to your marriage, you're introducing a level of divinity, but perhaps more importantly, for the practical side of it, eternity. You're introducing a certain element of eternity into the marriage. And that is why it's so significant, not just for, like we said in point number one, the significance of the family for God, right? Why the family is so important, because God wants a family. But here we're saying the opposite, that there's a significance of God in order for the family to be sustained, in order for the family to stand the test of all of the challenges that are going to be to them, all rightful, valid challenges that we spoke about. In order for that to happen, there needs to be this strong foundation of Torah and mitzvahs. This is why in every single letter to every single young couple that would get married, what would the Rebbe write to them? And I'm asking this question because most of you should know this. You've been to one Hasidic wedding or another, to one Chabad wedding or another, and they read the Rebbe's letter under the chuppah. What does the Rebbe write? The Rebbe always writes, may you build an everlasting edifice on the foundation of Torah and mitzvahs. So again, from a cynical perspective, it sounds like, oh, the Rebbe's just giving a Jewish blessing, whatever, beautiful, right? But it's not. That's not really the case. He's saying to them, I want your marriage to last forever, to be an everlasting edifice. I want your home, I want your relationship with your children, I want the whole family unit to last forever. And the best way of doing this, both spiritually, is to introduce God, but also psychologically, practically, the best way to do this is by introducing a divine element. Because when you live for something higher, then it's no longer about a particular connection point that falls apart, it's about something everlasting. Now, that said, many Jews haven't been raised without with a Torah and mitzvot education. Perhaps they didn't grow up doing Torah, mitzvot, etc. And taking it all on at once is obviously not a very practical path forward. So acknowledging this, the Rebbe offered very, very sage advice. You've heard this from every Chabad rabbi around the planet, my friends. Start by embracing a single mitzvah. Why? Because when you take on one mitzvah and you allow it to become the cornerstone of your family life, so then understanding that additional, meaning, and obviously you're understanding that additional mitzvahs can be added over time. So then you're introducing, even if it's only on a minute level and it's going to grow over time, you're introducing divinity into your marriage. This is why in 1974, when the Rebbe addressed the topic of family at great length, as noted above, right, all the way at the beginning of the lesson when we spoke about this, the Rebbe introduced 5 mitzvah campaigns involving the home and family life, and later on, the following year, he added 2 more. What were they? Take a look at page 46. You'll see tzedakah, right? And it goes through the details on the side. But think about it. What is the purpose of tzedakah here? What? To give poor people money? Yes, that is an important ideal. But what you're saying is this family is going to stand for something that's higher than itself. Same thing with the home filled with holy books, mezuzah, Torah study, Shabbat and holiday candles, kosher family purity. All of these campaigns are geared to help give Jews additional access points to have a firm foundation in their life, that their life should be built on a foundation of Torah and mitzvahs, as mentioned. Take a look at this video where the Rebbe is advising these things to people. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
In the late 1970s, Charles Ramat had a number of audiences with the Rebbe. During one of these meetings, he asked the Rebbe about something he was struggling with.
I told him, Rebbe, I'm having a crisis of faith. I really do not believe. I love Judaism. I love a lot of the rituals, but for me, they're nostalgic. How do I find true faith and true belief? And it's almost like we had philosophic discussions, but they were the things that were really bothering me more than should I invest in this property or should I invest in that property. And the Rebbe's responses were absolutely deep and incredible. And they were tailor-made to me. It wasn't a system that he said, you have to go into this system and you will be better. He really, I felt, was speaking to what would work for me. And he asked me, do you keep kashrut? And I said, no. Which, by the way, took a lot of guts to sit in front of the Rebbe and say that. It was actually a terrifying moment. But, you know, my relationship was based on total honesty. How could you lie to the Rebbe? He says, do you put on tefillin every day? I said, no. He said, so I'm going to ask you to do one thing. If I ask you to do one thing without any precondition, will you do it? I said, yes. Anything you ask me, I promise you I will do it. He says, will you and your wife agree to light Shabbat candles every Friday night while you're married? I said, done. And we weren't at that point. We have never missed in half a century lighting Shabbat candles. My children, when they grew up, even though they went to secular schools, Friday night and Shabbat, not the day of Shabbat, but Friday night was sacrosanct. Nobody went out. When my kids were teenagers, no parties. I had all kinds of business meetings, dinner invitations, you know, fun things to go do. Friday night is Shabbat, we're home. We never missed lighting the candles. And I would say that simple mitzvah, which is one out of, 500 that I'm not doing, has kept my family on a Jewish path throughout our lives.
Shmuel Abramson works in special education and lives in Monsey, New York. As a college student in the mid-1970s, he decided to reconnect to his Jewish heritage.
When I later transferred out of my school because I became interested in, finding the right path, and at one time I was going to come to yeshiva in Crown Heights, and at the last minute I backed out. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I ended up going to Yeshiva University. It was there that I met my wife, and my wife had come from a modern Orthodox family, and we started seeing each other and growing together. When we eventually became engaged, we scheduled an appointment with the Rebbe. Now, I didn't know how it worked. I was told, put your name down on a piece of paper, put your mother's name down, that we're just going to give the Rebbe that, and the Rebbe's going to give us a blessing, that's it. But I didn't want to miss the opportunity. So, some of the details I don't remember exactly, but I remember that I took 2 pieces of paper. And one I wrote, I figured that the Gebayim, the secretary, is going to collect one and give it to the Rebbe, but I wrote on another one, Rebbe, I'd like to ask you some questions. We came in, the Rebbe looked at me, the Rebbe looked at the piece of paper, and he said, you'd like to ask me some questions? And the second question was, I said, how do I and my Kala achieve compatibility? I said these words, I said, my lifestyle in the past was beyond her wildest nightmares. And how do we achieve compatibility? So the Rebbe looked at me, and then he said, are these your only 2 questions? And I said, yes. And he gave a big smile, looked at both of us, and he said, then you're going to be a very happy couple. And when the Rebbe said that, I felt like the whole room breathed a sigh of relief. I felt totally relaxed after that. The smile was a smile that lit up the room. And by the Rebbe saying that, by the way, that you're going to be a very happy couple, Blian Hara, after 36 years, that's rang true, rings true. The Rebbe answered the first question first that I asked, and the second question second. And he said in the realm of the compatibility question, he says, we need to have a common goal. He says, my goal, he said to me, is to strengthen my wife in Torah and mitzvahs. Her goal is to strengthen me in Torah and mitzvahs. And he said, and we should learn together. He suggested at that time, because of my lack of background at the time, we should learn Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he said, and he said he believes that it's in English, we could learn it in English, we should learn together. And he said, then when we take this common goal of fortifying each other, and we have children, we'll be able to communicate and give our go over to the child in Torah and mitzvahs. And he says all the differences will become dissipated in that common goal.
Mrs. Rachel Fogelman and her husband have been shluchim in Worcester, Massachusetts since 1947.
I would speak, and I organized groups of not women that belonged to the yeshiva, women that were outside of the yeshiva, outside of the fringe of our sphere. And I spoke, and they always asked me to do book reviews. And whenever I did a book review, no matter what the book, I always brought in something about Yiddishkeit and used the book review as a vehicle to speak about Torah and Yiddishkeit and to draw them closer. We went in for Yechidus, and the Rebbe just greeted us so beautifully and so warmly. And my husband mentioned to the Rebbe that the following week I was going to speak at the temple, and I was going to do a book review on The Chosen, Chaim Potok. The Rebbe looked at me, and he looked at me in the way that only the Rebbe could look at someone, with a deep perception, with a knowledgeable, otherworldly perception. And he looked and he said, they're going to listen to you. And then the Rebbe said, speak about Taras HaMishpacha. Well, I was taken aback. I would love to speak about Taras HaMishpacha, but this book, The Chosen, is a book about boys, about the relationship of a son and his father. And I thought, how am I going to bring that and speak about Taras HaMishpacha? But the Rebbe said, speak about Taras HaMishpacha. There was no question. That's what I had to do. Now, the main sanctuary in the temple is a very large, large room. It must hold about 1,000 people. It's huge. And pretty soon, the room began to fill up and fill up more and more until there was standing room in the back, and women were standing there. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I started out with a book by Chaim Potok. I described the scene, what it meant. And then I mentioned, did you notice that there are no women in this book? Did you notice that the father's wife is not mentioned? The son's mother is not brought to light? And there's no relationship between men and women. The reason there's no relationship in this book, because to touch upon it would require a book in itself. The relationship between men and women in Jewish life is holy and precious, and it is based on Taras HaMishpacha. And I went on from there, and I explained what Taras HaMishpacha was, what it meant to us, and why it was a flaw in the book and a flaw in most Jewish lives, because people are unaware of it. The audience was electrified. People called me up, women called me up, where is the mikveh that you spoke of? There was an old mikveh on the east side that was used by very few women. It was in such a decrepit old building. So what we knew, we needed a new building, and this started a campaign for a new mikveh building. That was how it began, and ultimately we built a mikveh here in Worcester. We have to realize that koiches pnimium, inner strengths that the Eibishter gives us, is what the Rebbe sees in us all the time. And he strengthens us in such a way and directs us in such a way that those koiches pnimium are brought to a fruition, that they have positive and actual results in reality.
Okay. So far, we've explored ways of overcoming obstacles in order to foster family cohesion. And we can do well to end the lesson right here. But as I mentioned, I think that whenever we talk at length about the importance of a family unit, the importance of community, the importance of being part of a larger unit, I think it's important to remember that that does not mean that we should therefore sacrifice the individual for that purpose. Because that's what happens when families try to be two together, and perhaps that's why teenagers always rebel, because they're looking for their individuality, they're looking for their individual identity. It's important to make sure that a family unit is not viewed by anyone in the family as a threat to their personal identity. In order to discuss this challenge, I'd like to take you to a letter of the Rebbe, which the Rebbe wrote on a very interesting topic. It's definitely, communal versus individual, but it's not in the family unit. It's politically. At the turn of the 20th century, many Jews made Aliyah, as we know, to the land of Israel. And many of the Jews that made Aliyah came from a very socialist background. And they wanted to live in their newfound home in some model of equalized cooperation. This led to which movement? Anybody? The kibbutzim.
Kibbutzim.
In the early years of Israel, pre the founding of the state, there were hundreds of kibbutzim that sprang up across the country. And these kibbutzim, by the way, unlike today, when you go visit a kibbutz, it's so to speak a kibbutz, but not really anymore. Everybody's got their own house and their own exclusively cooperative environments. Individuals did not pursue their personal passions or talents, but they went to work at whatever post was required for the communal, for the kibbutz, for the community. Kibbutz members were now paid salaries for their work. Instead, all the income was pooled, and that was then divided for whoever needed it. This organized, by the way, a desperate group of individuals and took a powerful cohesive force. I don't want to mitigate the kibbutz movement. It definitely had a lot of value to it. But as you can imagine, it definitely eroded to one degree or another the individual personalities, the individual identities. Okay. So in 1964, the Rebbe wrote a letter to a fellow whose name was Kaddish Luz. Okay. Kaddish Luz, Mr. Kaddish Luz passed away in 1972. He was an Israeli politician who served as the Minister of Agriculture between 1955 and 1959, early years of the State of Israel. He was Speaker of the Knesset after that, and he sent to Rebbe a copy of his work. He wrote a book called Avnei Derech, which means the stones of the way, like the stepping stones along the way kind of thing. And in this book, he details life on the kibbutz. And the Rebbe responded with his thoughts. He asked the Rebbe for his thoughts in the book. The Rebbe responded with his thoughts about the potential pitfalls specifically of a collective kibbutz. And as we read the letter, we're going to notice that it bears a lot of relevance to the family structure as well. Okay? Marilyn, Isaac we're holding here. Isaac, can you get us started? Text 10a. You're muted, though. Go ahead.
Yes. 10a, yes. The Talmud notes that just as people's faces differ from one another, so do their minds. Therefore, individuals attain continence and wholeness when they actualize their personal and unique potential in its fullest measure. This level of satisfaction is not found to the same extent when they engage in matters that they share in common with others. Instead, it is achieved through engaging in things that excel and that set them apart from their companions and surroundings. This achievement allows them to express their essence. On the other hand, human nature is not to live in solitude. It is not good for a human to be alone. And it is our nature to seek social interactions that allow us to reach our completeness.
Okay. And so we arrive at the $1 million question, right? The tension between these two truths. In order for somebody to self-actualize, they have to fully explore and express their potential and their talents and their ideals, etc., right? In order for somebody, however, to be a proper community team member and team player, etc., it requires them to put aside their personal identity and act as a team, right? There's no I in team, as every coach you've ever had tells you, right? So how do we maintain that balance? So the Rebbe continues. Marilyn, if you can read for us, please, text 10b.
On the one hand, collective living is essential because it provides a structure for people to share resources through which great things can be attained, greater even than the sum of the individual's strengths. On the other hand, collective living is not an end in itself. It is a preparatory stage to the development of each person's individuality and uniqueness, allowing it to be realized in the best and to the fullest. Often the idea of collective living arouses in members an inner resistance against the order that seeks to subdue the individual's uniqueness and endeavors to transform the individual into a member of a larger block. If, however, people are informed that their collective living leads to personal development and maximizes their ability to reach even greater personal goals by freeing them from the worries of less important goals, because the group utilizes its increased capacity to provide for everyone's basic needs without wasting critical time and resources, it would not only neutralize their natural resistance, but increase their passion and commitment to their roles within the group.
Thank you. It is a grave mistake to suppress individuality. Okay? It is important to have bittul, to be able to put your own ego on the side for the collective, to be able to get along with other people. It definitely involves biting back on your own personality a little bit, etc. But if part of being a part of the group means that you have to lose your individuality, then you're making a big mistake. The purpose of a group should be in order to strengthen each one of the individuals that are part of that group. The reason that they're joining together as a group is in order that each one of them should be able to help each other to be able to be the greatest that they can be. This applies to, obviously, a kibbutz. This applies to a marriage, right? If everybody's always compromising, we have a problem here. Why? Because we're all serving the marriage, but nobody is gaining for the marriage. Instead, everybody is just compromising on themselves for the sake of the marriage. No. Everybody should be compromising, that's fine, but the purpose of the marriage should be to serve the two individuals that are part of the marriage, that they should each be able to reach a greater level than they ever could have reached on their own. And similarly, the same thing is true about family. Family should be worshipped. Family should be treated as sacrosanct. We should recognize that the importance of the family unit is important in and of itself, as the Torah talks about it, because of the divinity that there is in it, etc., etc., etc. But the family can never take away the personality of the individual. It should only be there in order to enhance and strengthen the individual, to help them blossom into the unique individual that aligns with God's intention. Consider the analogy of God's name. Remember we spoke about God's name earlier, right? The Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey, etc., right? What did we say? Each letter is a letter. Individual letter, completely separate from every other letter. Beautiful. They form together. Only when they're together do they become God's name, right? Also beautiful. But when they become God's name, do they turn into a massive blob of ink? No. In God's name, there still is a Yud that's part of God's name, a Hey that's part of God's name, a Vav and a Hey, etc. And together they make up God's name. Once we understand this, we avoid using the family unit as a pretext for stifling individuality. And this was something that the Rebbe underscored on many different occasions. Perhaps most notably, and with this we'll conclude, and I see Mark, I still never got to your question, but right after we finish the lesson, we'll take the question. We're running perfectly on time here, so I don't want to mess that up. There is a wonderful letter that the Rebbe wrote. We're about to read it. It's from 1987. And the Rebbe writes this letter as a public letter to all Jewish families. As you can imagine, in the wake of this letter, all Chabad families started adopting these customs. What were these customs? Until today, my children's room looks like this. What were these customs? I think we're holding Mark. Mark, if you can read it for us, please. Text 11. Don't forget to unmute. Yeah. There you go.
Number 11. Greetings and blessings. To all Jewish children everywhere, God bless you all. Greetings and blessings. I am now presenting in greater detail my suggestion and urgent request to each of you, boy and girl, to turn your bedroom your bed, your table, and so on into a miniature home of Torah, prayer, and good deeds. You can do this by using your personal space and furniture to study some Torah, recite a prayer, put money into tzedakah box, excluding Shabbat and festivals, and the like, daily. You should own your own siddur, prayer book, and pray for it, and pray from it there your own hummus or other Torah book, and study it there, and keep your own tzedakah book box there. You should follow the Jewish custom of inscribing on the inside cover of your siddur and sacred books the Hebrew words. I don't know. I can't pronounce those.
Hashem, Haaretz, U'Meloah.
Okay. Meaning the earth and all its contents belong to God, with your name below it. If possible, write your name on your tzedakah book box as well.
In other words, the Rebbe is suggesting here that yes, we said that God wants the whole world to be a home for God. Yes, we said that the family is the way that Hashem wanted that it should be a home for God. But then also each individual should go and make their own room, their own lives into their own homes. In other words, after you finish on the collective, it's important to make sure that the individual doesn't disappear. Make sure you have your own tzedakah box. Make sure you have your own chumash. Write your name in it. It's your name. It's still God's world, right? But it's your name. So we're already aware of the importance of building our homes upon the foundation of mitzvos. So now there's another even more profound dimension that's being added. What happens? Each family member, even the children, should have a distinct part of that foundation, their mitzvah, bearing their very own name written on it. We're going to watch a video now. And in this video, we'll see the Rebbe encouraging single girls to light their own Shabbos candles. If we had more time in this class, I would love to go off on a tangent about that, about how the Rebbe wanted that every single girl that technically could absolve her obligation of lighting Shabbat candles by her mothers. Her mother lights Shabbat candles for the whole family. But the Rebbe wanted that each individual girl should light Shabbat candles starting at the age of 3. Right? Many of you I know attended my daughter's 3rd birthday party and watched that play out in real time. Right? And then after that, we'll watch, right in the follow-up to this letter, where hundreds of Jewish children go by with their pushka that they're going to put in their room, their tzedakah box, and how the Rebbe gives them a coin to put into the tzedakah box. It's beautiful. Please turn your attention to the video screen. Let me just make sure the sound is sharing. Here we go.
Nee. Nee, maar die wil gleich gesagt, we wonen in Benchling.
Vader Gassene?
Vader Gassene, dat is de bij ons. De 3 keer dat de helft dat de mazzel hier, we wonen in Leiften. Was free, niet warten met de Gassene.
Oh, oké.
Niet school dat die gebroken Vader Gassene, weet je.
Miriam Pashendel is carrying.
Ik ben veel steeds. Dat is naar de dokken. Double portion of blessing.
Ze zijn met hem.
Ze bent schlecht.
Wat?
Ze bent schlecht.
De Rebbe fragt, ze bent schlecht uit op Shabbos. Ze zijn te licht? Nee.
Ze bent schlecht. Dat is naar de dokken. Maar hij gilt gewoon. שנתיים. הוא כבר התחילו להדליק נרות. כן, רציתי להדלקה ביום שישי הבא. שלא יכול להצלוח.
אוקיי, halt het als in de school.
Een goede psoet.
Mijn vijf zijn dat, kom vijf, gaan ze, kom her. De Rebbe rief toch.
Du bent slier. Du bent slier.
Nog niet.
Nog niet, want dit is echt iets anders in Schmina Zeres. Nog in dat aan het dorp, in die neder. Maar nog had iets wel, en toen had ze dan später regen. Maar nu weet je dat het zich in 3 jaar is.
Ja, nog niet.
Dan de kinderen, leven.
Ja.
Zodat dan misschien de goed was, we gaan maar lustig in huis.
So the spiritual and physical realms to the Rebbe were always intertwined. Hold on. There we go. No, there we go. Within each family member, when each family member takes upon themselves their own reaffirmation, if you will, to commit their lives to Torah and mitzvos, to have a pushka in their room, to turn their room into what the Rebbe called the Cheder Tzivot Hashem, a room of the army of Hashem. That this is clearly a room. What's on the wall? Right? These things send a message to the child. You can grow up in a room that's full of posters of comic heroes and stuff, or that's probably putting it better. If you go to a teenage boy's room, there's all sorts of other posters on the wall, right? Or the room can have a pushka on the thing, of the aleph beis on the wall, also all these sorts of things, Torah books, etc. And the idea of this is in order to drive home to a child, in order to drive home to ourselves, that our home, just like last week we spoke about putting a pushka, a tzedakah box inside the business, to turn the business into a giving business, the same thing, we're trying to drive the same thing home into our family. Our family should be a family that gives, a family that stands for Torah values, etc. Because a foundation like that ensures the eternity of the family. And on page 53, again, we have an exercise to conclude the lesson. How can we better support individuality within the family? To write down some tips that we can do so. In conclusion, in today's lesson, we embarked on a journey to uncover the essential ingredients that nurture thriving families and flourishing relationships. And we found that the Rebbe's wisdom to guiding us was divided into three categories. Number one, obviously, we have to start with the family first attitude, right? The idea that the Torah treats the family unit as something that's divine, as something that's holy and important to keep strong. And this is because there is a certain level of divinity that happens within the family, and that's why the foundation has to be with Torah and mitzvahs. And finally, we appreciated that in order to counterbalance that, we have to make sure that each family member is aware of their unique contributions and their unique talents that makes them who they are. This concludes lesson 2. And we look forward to next week, same time, same place. Or if you'd like to join us at 7:30, I don't need any warning. Just come at 7:30 p.m. Tonight, for example, those that are on Zoom are missing out on some delicious pulled beef sandwiches. It's been up at Chabad all day. The roast has been, the brisket has been, melting away in the oven. But if not, we'll see you on Zoom next week for lesson 3, wholesome health. And for now, please turn your attention to the video screens for a summary of today's lesson.
Lesson 2. Family Bliss. 1. There is always room for improvement in all matters of goodness and holiness. Accordingly, we can all continually enhance our family relationships. 2. The Torah places great importance on family life and praises its virtues. By allowing God's presence into our families, we ultimately repair the entire world. 3. If we approach the family with a needs-based mindset, we might find justification to invest less into it, leading to weaker family bonds. By contrast, when we appreciate the Torah's view of the family, we are motivated to invest more and strengthen it. 4. To foster greater family cohesion, the Rebbe recommended that all Jewish families re-embrace the Torah tradition of celebrating the Shabbat meal together on Friday nights. 5. The Rebbe taught that Judaism provides the best foundation for a stable Jewish home. He therefore initiated various home-based mitzvah campaigns, encouraging Jewish families to embrace at least one mitzvah, making it a cornerstone of their family life. 6. Living together in a collective setting must aid each person in developing their individuality and uniqueness. Therefore, even as we aim for family cohesiveness, we must aspire simultaneously to honor each person's distinctiveness.
Thank you all for joining us for lesson 2. This has been Family Bliss, and we look forward to seeing you next week for lesson 3, Wholesome Health. Have a great day. I know there's
Bye.
Christian.